Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. I hope you have been doing well and staying safe. In today's video, we're going to do an in-depth installation of WebdriverIO. We're going to go into all the different features that WebDriver have when you're doing the installation, what is included in the package.json, what is included in our wdio config file, what is included in the test and page object that comes pre-packaged with WebdriverIO, and just give you some explanation to some questions that you may have been having when setting up WebdriverIO. If you don't want to stick around for this long video and you just came to get the installation set up, you just need to ensure you have Node.js installed along with Npm, you have Java, and you have Visual Studio Code. There are 4 commands for you to run to get WebdriverIO set up, and those commands are listed here on the screen. Let's get started. We want to install Node.js. It is a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. We're going to be using version 14.17.2, which has lifetime support. And if you go to downloads, you can see that there are a lot of different versions, but it automatically picks up the computer you're using it on. So for me, it recommended the Mac installer. So once I click on the version that I want to download, it's going to download the code for me. Node installs along with it npm. So if you go to npmjs.com, it allows you to get packages and solutions for your project, for whatever project you want to use. So it's really great. You can search for different packages that you want. So if we search for wdio, it shows a lot of different WebDriver and WebdriverIO packages that you may want to use for your test. For example, if we want a JSON schema validator, we can search for that and it will return that to us as well. Node and npm comes along together, so we're just going to go through and follow the instructions for installation. Verify that we have the correct version of Node. We go to our terminal and we say node space -v. This will show us the version that we have. We currently have version 14.17, which is the one we want to use. We can do something similar for npm by saying npm -v, and it shows us a different version of Node and npm that we have. Let us now install Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a code editor that's very useful, comes with a lot of different add-ons and extensions that you can use to make writing tests, writing code easier. There are different versions based on the operating system that you're using, so you can choose that. It has a wide variety of extensions that you can look at. If you want a linter, you can come here and search for the linter, and you will see a wide variety of linters come up, and you can select one based on the language or based on your preference. So let's go ahead and download it. Once we do that, we will get to a page where it talks about getting started, how you can get started with Visual Studio Code. It shows it in action. It gives us some examples of some of the things and languages that it caters to, like C, Python, Java, PHP, etc. So it does intelligent code completion, where if you're typing something, it will give you a lot of options that you can use. It also has streamlined debugging, where you're able to debug in Visual Studio Code and Terminal. It's fast, powerful editing, and it allows for code navigation, refactoring, and in-product source control. So it has really good features that you can use. So if you have GitHub or any other repo, you can control that from VS Code. and it shows you some getting started steps that you can check out. So if we open it up, we expand the zip, then we should be able to see Visual Studio Code installed. Once we open that, it takes us to the Visual Studio Code editor, where we see it has different links and all of that. Now this should be enough to get you started with WebdriverIO. However, if you encounter problems later in this video, check that you have Java installed. There has been some persons that after they install Java, the issues that they were having has been resolved. So Java is a platform that some applications depend on when they are being run. So if you don't have Java, it won't work. So just check to ensure that what we're going to be doing in the next slides work, and if it doesn't, then one of the possible reasons may be that you need to install Java. So to install Java, you're going to go to wdio.conf.js and you're going to follow the instructions to download. Once you have done that, you can go to your terminal, type in Java space hyphen version, and it should tell you the Java version that you're running along with the Java runtime environment, etc. Now that we have installed npm node, Java, and Visual Studio Code, let us now open up our Visual Studio Code to start installing other dependencies that we'll need for our WebdriverIO project. In our Visual Studio Code, we're going to say File, Add Folder to Workspace. We're going to be on our desktop and we're going to say New Folder. We're going to call this WebdriverIO Tutorial. And we're going to say Create. Once we do that, we click on Add. I just created this folder, so I'm going to trust the authors of the files in this folder. Next thing you want to do is you can toggle the terminal using this option here, or you can say terminal, new terminal. You want to ensure that you are in the folder, the root of the folder. So I'm going to say npm init. And what this does is set up a new npm package. We are going to be initializing a new npm package. It's going to be asking us for some details such as package name, version, description, entry point, test command. We are going to leave those blank for now. Git repository, keywords, author, you can enter your name, license, and then it presents to you what it is about to write, and you can just enter if it's okay. In this case it is, so I'm going to type in yes, and then over here I should now be able to see a package.json. This package.json is going to contain everything that I just typed in. So WebdriverIO tutorial and the author Julia Pottinger. Everything else was left as default. The next dependency that we will need is WebdriverIO. So we're going to say npm install WebdriverIO --save. This --save allows you to save it to your package.json so that if you're working or collaborating with other persons, they have a list of all the packages or npm modules that you are using and can do an npm install and pull down all of those packages so that their project will also work. So WebdriverIO has been successfully installed. If we look at our package.json, we see here that it has the dependency of WebdriverIO version 7.7.8. This is the latest version of WebDriver, and this is the version that we will be using throughout this tutorial. If you go into your root of the folder, you'll see that we now have a package.json and also a node module folder. The node module folder contains all the extended versions of the packages that we have installed. So you'll see things like Babel, all of those comes with WebdriverIO, etc. Now, normally if you're going to be sharing this project with someone, you will git ignore the node modules folder, but we won't cover git and all of that in this tutorial. but that's something to note. Now that we have installed WebdriverIO, the next thing that we want to do is install the WDIO CLI. This is a command line interface from WebdriverIO that is going to allow us to set up the WebdriverIO config file. Now this config file is going to store the path to our test that we want to run, any frameworks that we want to use, reporters if we're going to be running it on Chrome, Firefox, different browser versions if we want to run it headless, or WebdriverIO config file is going to contain all of that data. So by installing WebdriverIO CLI, it makes it easier for you to install and configure your project, as they are going to ask you some questions and give you some pre-configured options that is going to save you a lot of time, especially if you are starting a new project. So we're going to install the CLI by saying npm I at wdio/CLI --save. We have now installed the WDIO CLI and we want to run it. We do that by saying npx wdio config. Now npx means node package executor, and it comes along with npm when you install it, so you don't have to worry about installing npx separately. It comes along with npm. So we say npx wdio config, and that is going to run the config file for us. So it's going to ask us a lot of questions. We can use the arrow keys to go to the different options. So where are we doing our automation backend? For now, we are doing it on our local machine, but of note, WebdriverIO allows you to run in the cloud using Experitest, Sauce Labs, Browser Stack, Testing Bot, Lambda Test, different services, or if you have your own Selenium cloud and you want to set it up. So as we go through this, you're going to see a lot of the different options that WebdriverIO allows you to run with, and they are different options that you can explore. There are also other courses on Test Automation University, such as WebdriverIO with Appium, WebdriverIO with ApplyTools, and these are frameworks and tools that work along with WebdriverIO that after learning this course you can go and take a look at, just to learn more about all the features that WebdriverIO has. So now we're doing this on our local machine, so we're going to press enter. Different frameworks that we can use WebdriverIO with: Mocha, Jasmine, Cucumber. There's a course on Test Automation University as well about Mocha, so you can definitely go and check that out. Mocha and Jasmine are pretty similar in that they use the describe and it. I personally use Mocha a lot, so in this tutorial we'll be using Mocha. So we aren't going to be using any compiler. We're going to select the default for where our tests are located. And it asks us if we want WebdriverIO to auto-generate some test files. We're going to say yes, and WebdriverIO is going to auto-generate some test files for us in addition to setting up our config file. Auto-generating the test files is a new feature that WebdriverIO have added in version 6 and 7. So we want to create some page objects. So we're going to say yes. And where our page objects are located, we're going to select the default. Now it's asking us which reporter we want to use. There are different options for reporters. I normally use spec. You can use allure, you can use dot, etc. So there are different options that you can use. I normally use spec, so to select I press space, or in that case it's unselecting, and then I could have gone down and selected others with my arrow key. Now it's saying if we want to add a service to our test setup. So these services are what helps us to run our test. So we have, as I mentioned, Appium, which is very good for mobile automation. Browser Stack and Sauce are very good for running in the cloud on different devices. Sauce Labs has a lot of different devices that you can use. Selenium Standalone and Chrome Driver, they allow you to run on browsers locally or in the cloud. For this project, we're going to be using Selenium standalone. So we're going to press space to unselect Chrome driver as it is currently selected. And then we're going to use the down arrow to go down to Selenium standalone. Press space to select Selenium standalone. If you just scroll down, you see a lot more options. So there's Appium, Firefox profile, cross-browser testing, ESLint service, wait for, Lambda test, report portal, Docker, WDIO UI 5, Wiremark, so Slack integrations, image comparisons, WinApp which is really good if you want to do automation on Windows desktop or Windows devices, performance total, AWS device farm, etc. But out of those many options, and you can just see the amount of things that WebdriverIO allows you to work with and integrate with, we're just going to be using Selenium standalone. So the base URL, we're going to leave that blank. Then it starts installing all the dependencies. So we see the local runner, Mocha framework, we selected spec, and we also selected Selenium standalone service. So it's installing all of those things that we selected. Now it gives you instructions on how to start. So it says npx wdio run, and it gives the name of the config. Before we get into that, let us look at what we have. So we now have a folder called test. Within that folder, we have page objects, specs, right? If we go into page objects, we're going to see logging page, secure page, etc. Now, when we go into that, we see how WebdriverIO sets up page objects. So you have the locator here for username, you have the locator here for password, button, submit. Then it has a function to log in. So it's going to take a username and a password, and it's going to click on it. And so this is opening the login page. Based on this returning a super, I am assuming that there is a main open function that is accepting a parameter, in this case logging. So if we go back to page, we should see a main page. And as I said, open is accepting a parameter. So it's going to HTTPS, the Internet Heroku app, and it's appending logging that was passed in. The website that they are using for this example that they have generated the page object and tests for is the Internet Heroku app. It has a lot of different examples that you can choose from and practice, such as drag and drop, so it switches. Also has form authentication, so it has username and password. There are a lot of different things that you can just check out and get a feel for when you're doing test automation with this website. Now, if we go into secure page, this is where we're checking for a flash alert. So when we're on the Internet Heroku app and we are on login, right? So if I say /login, because that's what the test says. This is the flash alert. So if I right click and I inspect this, I see it has an ID of flash. So I'm expecting that the ID of flash is used somewhere in the test, right? So #flash gives us the flash ID here. So whether it's a positive scenario or negative scenario, it returns that flash and we can validate that the user is successfully logged in. If we go to specs, this is where the test will be. So we are saying I should log in with valid credentials, which are Tom Smith and super secret password. I'm expecting secure flash alert to be existing. I'm expecting secure flash alert to have text containing. You may be wondering what these assertions are, and WebdriverIO in version 6 and 7 have started to use their own expect assertions. Before that, they didn't have their own assertion built in like this, but you could have installed other assertions like chai.js. You can still do that. You can check out my previous video where I talked about WebdriverIO expect and chai assertions and see how you can learn more about it. Alright, so this is the test. It's going to log in and it's going to expect the secure page to be existing and to contain the text you logged into a secure area. So if we go ahead and look back in our terminal, we see that the command to run is npx wdio run wdio.conf.js. So if I copy that, paste here, then it starts to run the tests. So it opens it in Chrome and it ran. That was a bit fast, but as we see here, it says it passed. So those are all the dependencies that you need to set up WebdriverIO. In our package.json, where we have scripts and then test, we see that we have the default message, which is echo error no test specified, right? If we were to say npm test, which is a common command to run tests, we would not be able to run our test successfully. Previously in the command line, we were using the command that WebdriverIO gave to us, which is npx wdio run wdio.conf.js. But suppose we just wanted to run npm test. If we do that right now, our test will fail. We'll get the default error, no test specified, and exit 1. So we need to fix that. The command that WebdriverIO gave us to run our test, which is npx wdio run wdio.conf.js, we're going to replace what we have in our test script and put it there. So now, if we go ahead and say npm test, our test will pass because it is calling this command. Additionally, we could just say wdio as WebdriverIO and Node takes care of all the additional things that we were talking about, and as long as we have our config file called wdio, WebdriverIO will automatically know to look for it. So if we just say wdio for a test script and we run that test again by saying npm test, then you see that it works as well. A package.json is a JSON file that lives in the root directory of your project. It contains important information about the project. This information is stored in human-readable metadata such as the project name, project description, as well as information such as package version number, list of dependencies that is required by the application. So here we are seeing that we have author, name of the package, version, descriptions. We also have scripts. If you look at the script that I have, we just talked about the test script. We could also add suite scripts. So if I wanted to run a suite, I could say npm run actions and it would run the suite command that I have here. Also, as I said before, it has dependencies. So we have WebdriverIO version 7.8. We are using the WebdriverIO CLI 7.80. So this is telling you all the different packages and dependencies and everything that you have for your project. wdio.conf is a JavaScript file. The first line in that file is exports.config, and exports allow this file to be used globally. Config is the keyword WebdriverIO used to identify that this is the configurations of the project that is being exported. Because this is a JavaScript file, we can add certain things to the start of the file, such as console log. We can also use it to write functions. For example, here I have an if statement that is checking the environment that is being passed in, and based on that, I'm going to navigate to a specific URL. So because this is a JavaScript file, it gives us some options to play with for us to include different things that we may want to. So here I'm just using the environment variable along with the base URL that I'll talk about later to allow different URLs or environments to be selected from the terminal when running my test. So our runner configuration is runner local. Remember when we were installing and setting up WebdriverIO, we selected that we wanted it to be run locally. We had different options such as SaaS or in the cloud, but we selected the local option. So here on line 9, it's saying that we are running our test locally. Now, further along, we talk about specifying test files. This defines what tests we want to run. WebdriverIO uses the keyword specs. Once it is we run our test, it's going to come into this configuration file and say, what path is specs telling me to run my test from? So here we are saying at the root of my project, I have a folder called test. Whatever folder is within that and whatever file, once it is a JavaScript file, then I want those to be considered my tests. Specs are defined as an array of spec file. Optionally, you can use wildcards. Wildcards are the asterisk. Asterisk indicates that anything, any file name, any folder name is accepted. We also define here suites. Now, suites are a group of tests that are within a specific folder. So if you look here, I have a suite called actions. And so similar to my spec file, I am denoting the path that you can find those tests. My spec file just says anything within the test folder, but because I want a suite of tests, a specific grouping of tests, in my actions path, I go deeper into my test folder and say whatever is in my actions folder, then I want those to be run whenever I run npm actions. Now, npm actions, I just talked about in the package.json where I was setting up the script. So I had the script test and I also had the script action. So this would have been needed as well to the script in the package.json to allow my suite to be run. The next thing in our config file is capabilities. This is where you define the different capabilities that you want your project to run on. WebdriverIO can run multiple capabilities at the same time. So based on the number of capabilities that you have specified, WebdriverIO will launch several test sessions. So for example, if you have 3 different capabilities, that is, you want browser Chrome, browser Firefox, and browser Safari, then WebdriverIO will acknowledge those 3 different capabilities. If you set your max instances to 1, that is, you only want a maximum instance for each capability to be run, then WebdriverIO will spawn 3 processes, 1 for Chrome, 1 for Firefox, 1 for Safari. Now, if you have 10 tests and you have set max instances to 10, that means that each test will have an instance for themselves. Therefore, at the same time, all 10 tests will be run. And because you have a capability of Chrome, Firefox, and Safari, if you multiply that 10 by 3, then you are going to be getting 30 processes to be spawned. So think about that when you're talking about your capabilities, especially if you are running it on a grid that only have a certain number of instances available. You don't want to spawn too many instances if you don't have those available based on the server that you're running it on. Within capabilities, you'll notice that there is a next max instance. This max instance allows you to override the general max instance. So for example, if you have an in-house Selenium grid with only 5 instances available, you can make sure that not more than 5 instances will get started at a time. So for the Firefox capability, you'd have to override that max instance and say 5. So it won't observe the max instance that's outside that says 10. However, your other instances like Chrome and Safari will still do 10. So that's something to note. Next is log level. You have log level info, log level debug, log level warn, log level error, and log level silent. Ensure that it's not on log level silent, because if you get errors, then you won't really be able to check where the error is coming from, what's really the error message. So info is a good place to have your log level on. You also have bail. Bail is if you want to run your test until a specific number of tests have failed. The default is 0, which means don't bail, run all tests. So if you want to stop all your tests if there's more than 5 failures, you can set your bail to 5. Base URL is what I was talking about using the environmental variables. You can set a base URL in order to shorten your browser.url command calls. Once your URL parameter starts with the /, the base URL gets prepended. So that allows you to not write out the base URL all the time everywhere in your test if you are doing a browser.url call. It just allows you to write the / and it will prepend your base URL. WebdriverIO config file contains a lot of other things. There is a default timeout for all wait for commands, wait for displayed, wait for exist, wait for enabled, wait for clickable. All of those follow the wait for timeout. This is the default timeout. You can change it, but I would recommend leaving it for now. Then we have a default timeout for request. So if the browser driver or grid doesn't send a response, it has 120,000 milliseconds to wait for that response. Then you also have a default request connection retry count. And then very importantly, we have our test runner service. Selenium standalone is the one that we selected when we were installing WebdriverIO. This was where we were going through the many different services such as Chrome driver, Sauce, Docker, etc. So any of the different services that we would have selected, they would have been shown here if we had selected them. However, we only selected Selenium standalone. If you want to see what those look like, then you can select some of the others and then come into your config file and take a look at them. Then we have our framework. We chose Mocha, we had Jasmine and Cucumber to choose from. We have our reporter, we had Dot, we have Spec, etc. We had Allure to choose from. And then we have options that can be passed to Mocha. So we have Mocha options such as we are using the UI option, which is BDD, Business Driven Development, which specifies that we're going to be using the describe and the it in the way that we write our test and the way that we write our test suites. And we also have the option for timeout. Finally, we have a lot of hooks that we can use. We have on prepare, we have on worker start, we have before session, before command, and we have before test, which here we have it filled out. This is in the previous video that I have about WebdriverIO expect and try. You can take a look at that. We filled out the before test hook. We also have other hooks that we can use in our WebdriverIO project, and in a future video I will go through what all of these hooks are used for and how you can use them. So after command, after, before test, on complete are all hooks that you can use in your WebdriverIO project. So this is what the WebdriverIO config file looks like. I hope this gave you a better understanding of the different things that you can do. The latest version of WebdriverIO has switched from using sync as the default to now using async as the default. To find out how you can use async in your project and what is happening with the WebdriverIO project regarding async and sync, subscribe to be sure to get the notification for my next video where I'll be talking about async and sync modes in WebdriverIO. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.